everyone. Welcome to Finding Joy in the Mundane. I am your host, Aya Nichols. Thank you so much for watching this episode and being on this journey with me as we unpack Philippians and continue just growing more in our faith and learning more about who Jesus is and how that applies to our life and how that increases our joy. So today I wanted to continue talking about Paul and everything that he wrote in Philippians, because Philippians is known to be the book that holds all the resources or the route to joy. And it may be because he said joy a million times while writing it, or that it has the actual genuine truth of where we can find our joy and our confidence and satisfaction in life, because let's be honest, it's very hard to find even when things are going well. I think that's the worst part, is that even when things are going well, I don't think most of us actually experience that fullness and that full joy that we are constantly wanting and hoping that we get. So that is why I wanted to really hone in on Philippians 3 today and just talk about what Paul was saying to the Philippians at this time, because I think even though that was thousands of years ago, I think it's still applicable today, even more today, because we've had thousands of years to be able to understand and interpret it, and we're still sometimes getting it wrong. Which we will. We will never have perfect interpretation. But I think the church now has the tools in order to be able to really help its members and believers to know where to go to when they're trying to search for something, especially as big as joy. So, Paul, Philippians 3. In Philippians 3, we see Paul talking about having no confidence in the flesh. And essentially that has been interpreted into don't trust in yourself. Don't trust in anything earthly. Don't trust in anything that we can physically see. And even though that's the most basic interpretation, honestly, I think it goes so much deeper. And that's what I wanted to go into today. And the deeper part is talking about the actual circumstances that was going on in the Philippian church at this time, which is people had just become Christians, and now they're realizing that there are Gentiles and Jewish people who are now Christians. So this entire time, God has been almost exclusively for the Jews. He has been there for them, chosen by them, protected them, and that is why for most of all the Old Testament, it says to not interact and not mix with the Gentiles, because they were born Jew and they were meant to stay Jew, because that meant that they were chosen and set aside for God. And that included them having to do certain things that were different from the rest of the world to show that they were chosen by God, because these sets of rules, like the Torah, was given to them by God to show the entire world that they are different. They live by a different set of rules, that whatever God or deity or idol the other Gentiles may be worshiping at the time, it didn't count for them. And that was ultimately the purpose of the law. People can discuss all day long about the purpose, and how we can discuss all day about the purpose of the law, but ultimately it comes down to God separating his people from the rest of the world. And at that time especially, how else would you do that? How else would you show that you're different other than circumcision? Because the culture back then did not circumcise. So now all of a sudden we're circumcising. Sacrifices. They did human sacrifices, while the Torah required animal sacrifices. Rituals. There were so many rituals back then that involved harming yourself in order to please the deity you're trying to worship. And the rituals that God provided, the Lord, was things like the Passover, where it's communing together, having and celebrating who he is and the joy that is with him together. It's about having dinner with him. Honestly, that's what the Passover is having dinner with Jesus. That's what the Passover is having dinner with God. Is that really that much to ask? Yes, it came with certain things that you have to do because you're having dinner with God. He is holy. So we wanted to make it extra special. For Thanksgiving, goodness, we spend hours, days making it special. And that's just for most of our family that we don't even like. So yeah, if I'm having God over for dinner, I'm gonna want to do what makes it special, even though like what I'm actually doing means nothing. Like, does me having sage or whatever really that important? No, but it's the thought that counts, you know? And I think that's what Paul is talking about in this chapter, is that it's the thought, it's the faith that we have that is truly valuable, not the actions that we do or don't do. So back then, after people were becoming Christians, the Jews felt like they were more entitled or more worthy to be Christians. Or they were just higher levels of Christianity, like tiers. Like he was more Christian than me or something. And I've seen that in the church where we talk about a person being extra saved and being a Jesus freak just because you decided and go out of your way to make sure that you follow those certain rules. And there's two ways of doing it. There's one way where you just want to make sure that you are saved. You want to dot all the, I'm Lebanese, you want to dot all the things and then do all the crosses, or you just want to, show God that you love him. Because how else would we? Other than professing it, that's one other way. Other than showing in our hearts, that's one other way. Is it a requirement? No, but we can. As Christians, should we celebrate the Passover? We don't have to, but we certainly can. And sometimes I genuinely feel convicted about that, to the point where why don't we celebrate Passover? Maybe that's something that we do at the church as after church we commune together and that's kind of our Passover. But as far as families holding room for Jesus in their dinner table, we don't do that. We kind of do it by praying before every meal, I will say. But it's completely different to have an entire setup for welcoming Jesus into dinner versus just thanking him for the dinner that was provided. And that is the distinction that I'm talking about, is that these small distinctions are the things that matter the most. Back then, they were wanting to have some sort of hierarchy of people who follow the Torah completely, follow the law, and because of that, then they should have more holiness, more righteousness. And for some reason, that would give them a better chance at heaven. I'm not entirely sure I know what it is that more righteousness would give you, other than to please your other people around you. Because as far as Christ is concerned, with his blood, we are all righteous the same. His blood covers us, each an individual, completely and wholly. So there is none to be gained as far as we're concerned. And that is what Paul is saying. In here, they were talking and disagreeing about their credentials, how, they were Jewish, so if you came from a certain tribe, like one of the first tribes that came to the promised land from Moses' time, or you had all these different rankings. I mean, think of the Pharisees. They were the highest rank of Judaism. They were the highest rank of Jews. They studied the law their entire life. They follow it to a T, and they make sure everybody else follows it to a T, because if they don't, then they have lost favor with God. Or even worse, they lost their love for God. I think that one is what they use more, is that, oh, you don't love God, so you can't sacrifice these things for him. You can't do these things for him. Then do you actually love him? And how many times has that same argument been given to us? Well, if you loved me, wouldn't you do this? Yeah, I guess. But making me do it, does that mean love? That's the point that he was making. And they were all going off on the different ways that they have achieved and that they deserve this extra type of righteousness. And Paul just goes in and says, if anyone were to have any credentials that are worth anything, it would be him. Why? Because he was born a Jew and was a Roman citizen at the same time. Not only was he born a Jew, but he also followed the law to the point where he himself was a Pharisee. Not just a Pharisee, but a Pharisee who defended the faith. So he's an extra holy Hebrew Jew Roman citizen that defended the faith. And towards the very end of chapter 3, he says, all of that is nothing. His family status, no matter how great his family status was and how many privileges that provided him, he said it's worth nothing. Your house not being able to be taken away from your government is a privilege. And that's one heck of a privilege. To go down the street and not have to worry about a guard beating you up just because you looked at him the wrong way, that is a privilege. So it mattered to them back then. Status mattered so much because it determined the way they lived every single day. So now when they've become these new Christians, they're being asked to let it all go and be like, that doesn't matter. Your status, your wealth, your poverty, your family, your citizenship, none of it matters. All that matters is that you love and believe in Jesus, and that you put all of your heart and love and faith in him. It's so simple, yet so hard, because it contradicts everything we've ever known about this world and that we live in this world, because thousands of years later, we're still living this way. We're still living in the, to be a true Christian, you have to do this, or you have to be this, or you have to give up this. The first week I ever became a Christian was in college. I was 19 at the time, and I went on my fall retreat, and I met God, fell in love with him, and devoted my life to him that weekend. I didn't even know fully what it meant to be a Christian. All I knew is that I wanted to love God, and I knew that he loved me. That's why I wanted to love him. I didn't want to love him because someone said that I should, or it would benefit me in other way. I genuinely fell in love with him because he loved me, and he showed that. And I couldn't believe it. Like, I couldn't understand why something so holy would cherish me so much as someone that was so broken, who was in a sorority, who was partying, who was doing all the things, who's done all the things. Like, I've done nothing. I've had no credentials to offer to earn or prove his love. And yet there it was. So yeah, I fell in love with him then. And I wanted to be a follower. I wanted to be a believer. That's all I wanted. I didn't care about status. Never had it. Don't really care. Don't care about privilege. I don't even know most of the privileges that most people have. So that was nothing to me. All I wanted was to be loved and cared for. And that's exactly what he had to offer. So I become a Christian that weekend. And on Monday, I go and meet some of the leaders of Crew who have been Christians a while and are following the Bible, following all these different things. And I didn't honestly know what it is that I was supposed to be doing. All I knew is I'm not supposed to drink. I'm in a sorority. We're drinking. And I didn't necessarily want to give that up that time at all. So being raised a Muslim, I'm used to leaders telling me, yes, you have to give this up. You have to give this, wear the hijab, never ever show your hair to anyone to any male, even your cousins. Pray the 7 times a day. So, I was used to the 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to do these to be considered a faith-based person. So I think that is why I went to one of the student leaders and said, now that I become a Christian, do I have to give up drinking? He looked at me and straight up said, that is between you and God. That's not my decision to make. It stops me every time. The fact that my decisions and the way I live my life could actually be a personal walk, a personal conversation with the Lord I have faith in. Like, I almost have a say in it, a voice in it, that he would care enough to have the conversation. Because do you really think, when you think about God, that he's willing to have a conversation with you about your behavior that is hurting you or that is illegal? No, we just assume that he would no longer love us and completely abandon us because that's what we think, because we're not holy. And yet that's not true. The truth is, it's a conversation. It's faith. It's a relationship. The truth is, it's a conversation. It's relationship. It's faith with the one and true God, who, yes, we should definitely honor and respect in every way, shape, or form. The fact that he set aside that right in Jesus, I think says more about him than any law could ever show. So yeah, every single credential, every single status, every single thing that I have to prove, I count it as nothing. Even in my show, I mentioned that I went to seminary, but I never bring that up as the reason why I think that you should be watching this or that you should take my word as truth. I really hope that you who are watching are not just listening because I went to seminary. I hope that gives you a little bit more confidence. But I truly hope that the reason why you're listening is because you hear God. And I pray more than anything is that I'm sharing God. So it may not sound like the normal church. It may not sound like a sermon. It may not sound like anything, yet it could completely coincide with it. This could be a sermon if I was a man in the Southern Baptist Church. This could be a Bible study if I was a part of Crew. But in reality, I didn't want to be any of those things. I didn't want to be a pastor. I didn't even necessarily want to be a Bible study teacher because so many different rules and red tape came with it. I just wanted to be able to talk about God, share his great knowledge that I learned. And yes, it took me 3 years and I have the plaque to show it, but those 3 years had taught me so much about who God is and how to see it that all I can think about is if people truly knew this information, they couldn't help themselves but fall in love with God. Not if they were able to take the time. And not everyone can take 3 years of their life and devote it to just pure reading scripture and studying it. I get that, but that's why I'm here. to kind of like break it down in a way where the average person can go back, reread the scripture with the information I gave, and then have a better understanding of what it's saying. I'm not rewriting the Bible. I'm not reinterpreting it. I'm just showing how to interpret it so that way people can finally understand what it's saying. And that is a kind of power that I believe the Lord has blessed me with, and I want to bless the rest of the world with. In any way I can. So I will continue doing this. I will continue sharing Christ and continue going through scripture, though it may not be all that popular, but it's where my heart is and it's where it came from. And I want to be able to show that without judgment. And I would love to be able to start conversations and hear your views on what you think when you first read that scripture or what you have been told about that. I would love those conversations. So if you're willing to have them, please post it, message me, anything. But till then, I guess I will see you next week. Thank you for watching. Bye.